Ole Miss is going to blast the Citadel this weekend, and that levels up this team to some rarefied air. We have the answer key before Saturday's test. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we're going to lock in our official picks and favorite props for this weekend's matchup with the Citadel, and this might be the trickiest game yet because you don't know the playing time situation that's going to happen and how this game is necessarily going to go. So get ready for it to get a little bit weird. Next, we'll talk about expectations, spotlight a few players that we're watching closely, and begin to turn our attention toward the Florida Gators after we get through this game against the Citadel. It's an FCS opponent, and that is all that stands in the way between Ole Miss and its best start since the glory days. With a final turn of the season now coming into view, we can see exactly how this is going to play out a little bit. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to our insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And what it is the most fun way to follow your team, and this is a very fun team to follow right now. Ole Miss, with a win over the Citadel, would go 9-1. And that leads me into my intro take in today's show. And that is, Ole Miss can do something that hasn't been done since the glory days by just beating an FCS program in the Citadel. And what I mean by that is, with the win over the Citadel, this Ole Miss team goes 9-1. For the first time, that is the best start for an Ole Miss football team since 1962. And this is rarefied air. Now, a lot of that, the reason they haven't gone 9-1 in previous years is because the schedule kind of quirked in a weird way. And what I mean by that, last year, they were actually having 2 losses, but the year before in 2023, they had the Alabama game or something like that. No, the Georgia game popped up. So the Georgia game was the 10th game of the season. The year before that, it was the Alabama game. It was the Alabama game in 2022. And then you look at the time before that, it was 1990. You had the Tennessee game in Memphis, if anybody remembers that as well. But those are the 3 times that I can remember this Ole Miss team going 8-1 besides this year. I looked over the roster of what they've done over the last several years, and sure enough, it takes you back to 1962. Now, they went 9-1 in 1961 too, and they had an equal year in 1960 and in 1959. So, I mean, pump the brakes on whether or not you've gotten there, but this is an opportunity for Ole Miss to actually put themselves in the same sentence as those teams. And that was the greatest 5-year period just about in any college sports team, but definitely for Ole Miss. And it's pretty cool to think about the year after the year. We always talk about the year after the year. Last year was supposed to be the year. Ole Miss had the second best roster in all of college football last year. They choked away a game against Kentucky, lost a game in overtime to LSU. Some would argue choked that game away as well. And that Florida game was absolutely a disgrace. But the year after that, when Ole Miss was supposed to be rebuilding this year, they've just went about their business putting stuff together. This isn't the same looking team. It's a very talented team. And the fact that people might not know how talented they are, that's kind of something about them, not necessarily about Ole Miss. We put in our preseason picks that Ole Miss was going to go 10-2. And I had losses at Georgia and at Oklahoma. I thought those were the 2 games that Ole Miss didn't match up well in. Well, Ole Miss beat Oklahoma on the road, and what is turning out to be a very good win for the Ole Miss Rebels. So this win over the Citadel would put this Ole Miss football team in the rarefied air of being in the same sentence with the 1962 team, the 1961 team, the 1960 team, the 1959 team, that rarefied air of like, hey, this is awesome. And this is also something that has been a long time coming, nearly 60 years since Ole Miss has been in this position. I think it has been 60 years, actually. 2025 and 1962. That's about there. My father, whose birthday yesterday, he turned 75 years old, which, by the way, if you see him in Newton, Mississippi, go walk up and give him a hug and tell him I told you to do it. Seriously, just surprise him, drop it. It would be absolutely hilarious if you see him. But this Ole Miss football team being able to be mentioned with that is pretty cool. He was 12 years old when that happened, my father. 12 years old. He's 75 now. He was 12 years old. And being in that thing. Lane Kiffin always talks about on his recruiting visits when people come into Oxford, Mississippi. Go someplace and do it for the first time instead of someplace where it's been done before. It's his favorite recruiting pitch. He says it to absolutely everything. He probably has it on a wall somewhere, like as a motivational poster. And he is so close to doing that himself at Ole Miss. This year, they're in a legit national championship run. They can have those thoughts of what's going on. They are literally a 4th and 2 stop. If a tackle gets made, the play was there to be made. If they make that tackle, they beat Georgia in Athens, and they're sitting at 9-0 right now. And we're sitting here talking about, hey, this Ole Miss team can match. They can match that 1962 team in this next game against the Citadel. That's how close. It was one play. So this team can be a team that is talked about for generations at Ole Miss. Now, the other teams that went 8-1, the teams that lost to Tennessee, that lost to Alabama, that lost to Georgia, they kind of ho-hum. We're not even going to talk about that because the finishing didn't happen. The finishing needs to happen this year. And this year happens with all the noise that is around Lane Kiffin from Florida and from LSU. And you have to block that out because the reality is you are plus 10-point favorites on every team left on the schedule. That includes the Citadel. That includes the Florida Gators and Oxford, which has a chance to be an unbelievably weird game. I cannot wait for that week because it is going to be that much fun. And then the Egg Bowl in Starkville. And there's nothing more dangerous in this Egg Bowl rivalry. Anybody that follows Ole Miss and the Egg Bowl and all that knows there's nothing more dangerous than a 5-win Egg Bowl team. So there's still some work left to be done, but 11-1 is in sight. You should be 9-1 after this weekend against the Citadel. Period. There's really no getting around that. They should be 9-1 after this game. Then the Florida game comes in, and you're playing for essentially a playoff berth in that game. The whole time you're going in practice, win this game, make the playoffs. And it could look like the South Carolina game where the moment just is a little bit too hard for the Ole Miss players at the beginning, but it could also look like the Arkansas game from a year ago to where they just completely go off and they are humming because everything is at the fingertips of this Ole Miss team right now, right here. Citadel game, Ole Miss should win that game because they have the better team, significantly the better team. They should win the game against the Florida Gators because they have the better team. They should win the game against Mississippi State because they have the better team. That doesn't mean they will on those last two. It's all depending on how all of this noise gets handled, how the players lock into what's going on. And like with Daquan Wright before the South Carolina game, He got everybody pretty fired up by saying there are no days off for the next 30 days. That means until the end of the regular season, there is no overlooking anybody. It's all about you. It's all about making you better. And if Ole Miss makes it to the playoff and hosts a playoff game, the biggest football game in the history of the state of Mississippi, that'd be really cool. I'm pretty fired up to see what they can do. But the fact that this Ole Miss football team is in a position to be talked about with that 1962 team, that we're having legitimate conversations about that era of Ole Miss football, that should have every Ole Miss fan excited. And honestly, we all kind of are. You know, what will this game against the Citadel actually look like? And who are the players that we will be keeping an eye on Saturday? All of this is coming up right after this. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it all down. For Ole Miss, Kewan Lacy delivered in a big way. Ole Miss was up by 9, and Lacy had a 55-yard touchdown run en route to a 167-yard night and put away the Gamecocks. When the pressure was on, he came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance was not a fluke. Kewan Lacy is on a streak. And just like Kewan Lacy delivered for the Ole Miss Rebels, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you can save every Saturday you order. You can stack all of that up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. So order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period runs through November 18th. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to it on. Give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep all of this free. Locked On is getting ready to change the game yet again, all in the name of having fun following your team. It's coming in December. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. So this is going to be an interesting game in the fact that you don't know how it's going to end up. You don't know the time that a player is going to play. You're not aware of what's going on. Trinidad Chambliss could play 3 quarters. He could play the full game. He could play till halftime. You just don't know. But in this game, there are 3 players that while they're in the game, I'm paying attention to. And the reason I'm doing that is basically to get them ready to go for the Florida Gators the next week. Listen, it is good that the Citadel is so run heavy, although they do not run a typical military academy type offense. They run more of a wing T, like 90s Mississippi high school football type of offense. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm talking about you're going to see some fullback bellies and all of that stuff. This Citadel team is going to force the Ole Miss front 7 to work. And I do want them to stretch their legs a little bit and want somebody to intentionally try to stress them in different ways. And the Citadel, even though they're FCS, they have good football coaches, which means in the running game, they're going to try and figure out a way to stress this Ole Miss defensive line. And you need to know that going into the Florida game and going into the Mississippi State game. If you want to accomplish every one of your goals, you need an effort from the Citadel that makes this defensive line work. You don't want a dominant thing to where there's 7 yards rushing and 19 yards total for the entire game. No, you want the Citadel to make you work a little bit. So you have to have something to work on going into the Florida game. So that is something that I'm going to be looking for. I want a good effort from the Citadel Bulldogs in this game to get Ole Miss ready for the Florida game and the Mississippi State game. And if you can do that, you're going to be all right. The players that I'm going to be watching in this game, it's pretty simple. Trinidad Chambliss, he was off against South Carolina. I want to see if he just kind of clicks back in. He's on a little bit to where he starts trending towards being the Oklahoma and the LSU version of Trinidad Chambliss against the Florida Gators. Remember, Florida has Ron Roberts as the defensive coordinator, and he has consistently given Lane Kiffin offenses trouble over the years. And that includes stops at Baylor, Auburn, and last year at Florida as well. Good players versus a good scheme, that can be problematic, and Florida has a really good defense. Now, Kewan Lacy, I want Kewan Lacy to have 5 carries in this game. That is my goal. He plays the first quarter, he sits down, the game's over. You start handing the ball off to Logan Diggs and eventually to Shakai Mills-Knight and Damian Thomas and all those guys. That's what I want. So I will be watching to see how much Kewan Lacy actually takes part in this football game. Now, the other thing is, just because I couldn't list every player on the defensive line, I only listed William Eccles. This defensive line is going to be stressed a little bit because there's part of the running game that is going to attack them. They're going to use their slants and their movement against them. That's how these offenses kind of work. The reason the service academies are so good is because they're really good at scheming up the run game. I want to see if William Eccles, if Cam Franklin, if Xavion Harris can have their way. Maybe this isn't a game to slant so much. Maybe you just kind of win one-on-ones with the people that's in front of you. And if you can do that, you're probably going to make it to the next level in this game. I do expect Ole Miss to do pretty well in this game. And the keys that I listed yesterday, pretty simple. Play a clean game. That is the main key for the Ole Miss Rebels. Play a clean game. If you can do that, there's no way that the Citadel can hurt you unless you play dirty, period. And I want to see the timing of Trinidad Chambliss and the Ole Miss receivers improving before the Florida game, and get up so the game is out of hand and you can get these starters out of the game and they're not playing football and you don't have to worry about rolling an ankle against the Citadel with the Florida Gators coming up on the schedule. I'm going to be watching Kewan Lacy, as I said, get him off the field as soon as possible. Citadel is going to be very run-centric. That front 7 has to show up and play everybody, including on the back end of the defense, because you never know who is going to be called on and who needs to be called on for the Ole Miss Rebels as this season moves on. We saw Cedric Beavers against South Carolina with Antonio Kite out. Beavers got thrust in the lineup. He actually played really well. Now, a lot of that might be because Lenore Sellers is just a horrible quarterback, but Beavers played pretty well in that game as a backup cornerback. And Antonio Kite is by far the best Ole Miss defensive back this season. So we'll see what it looks like. We'll see what this team can do against the Citadel and on to Florida and on to Mississippi State. There's a lot of good football that's on the schedule. Ole Miss needs to get past the Citadel, and I use that phrase intentionally. Get past the Citadel. It doesn't matter if it's by 1 point or 35. Get past them. Then you have the Florida Gators, and that atmosphere is going to be electric. It might be the best atmosphere that has ever existed in Ole Miss Stadium. If you look at what is at stake. I get it. Narcissistic fans and burners want to make this about Florida. It's not about Florida. It's about whoever is playing against Ole Miss. It could be South Carolina. It could be Mississippi State. Heck, it could be Vanderbilt if you were playing them this situation. That atmosphere will be electric because of what it means. And that is something that I am absolutely looking forward to seeing and how much it comes through. They're doing the belt popping thing and all of that stuff. Okay, whatever. But it's a game to where if Ole Miss wins that game and moves to 10-1, the game in Starkville kind of becomes a coronation. I get the fact that they're going to be playing for a bowl game even if they lose against Georgia and Missouri. I get that 100%. But if you win that 10th game and beat the Florida Gators, you're probably going to end up somewhere around 4th in the standings, which means you're not going to fall 6 spots by losing to a 6-win SEC team on the road. That's not going to happen. And I think 10 wins is good enough if it's the right 10 wins for Ole Miss to make it. If Ole Miss loses to Florida and beats Mississippi State, it gets iffy. If they beat Florida, then lose to Mississippi State, there's a big-time argument for Ole Miss making it into the playoff field. But the goal is hosting a playoff game. The goal is potentially the SEC title game, if that's what you want to do. But the playoffs are absolutely in reach for this Ole Miss football team. As we talked about in the first segment, best start since 1962 is on the table. And 63 years, best start in 63 years since John Vaught was the coach. There's a statue on Ole Miss's campus of John Vaught. It's pretty cool. It's really kind of neat to see what's happening. And this being the year that they're going to potentially tear down the Tad Smith Coliseum, that building was built in like 1966, which means this best start would predate the construction of the Tad Pad, which is being torn down because it's decrepit. So kind of is what it is. We'll see. Anyway, when we look in our final segment, we're going to lock in our final picks for this game and break down the different directions it could go, paths, and our picks coming up next. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see the parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in all of the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead time kind of helps you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service, they always have your blind side covered. So you need parts fast for a project. Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The Part Finder tools and 3D schematics can also save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perk, like priority shipping and dedicated support, make the whole process smoother. So join that free Trademaster program today and score some serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and dedicated support. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHCollege5. That's all one word, SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. Let's talk some picks and props as the Citadel Bulldogs and Ole Miss Rebels are getting ready to take each other on a football game tomorrow. Citadel, an FCS team. This is the Ole Miss cupcake for the season. But there's a lot of noise going on around everybody, as you well know. If you're on social media at all, you've seen it. But I think that Ole Miss is going to be able to get that 9th win and go to 9-1. And this is the first time that Ole Miss would go 9-1 in a season, their best start since 1962. Pretty cool stuff. Some of the props that I'm looking forward to in this game, Austin Simmons, 100 yards passing. I would like to see that. Coming in, I want him to play the entire second half and actually run the offense a little bit. I want to see Logan Diggs running for north of 50 yards in this game, maybe a touchdown or two. And this feels like a Deuce Alexander game. I think Deuce Alexander has 5 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown in this game. It just kind of feels like this is the type of game that he breaks free a little bit. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. If you want to look at the final score in this game, I'm going with Ole Miss 55, the Citadel 10. I think it's going to be a game where they're actually looking pretty locked in. It has a chance to be sloppy, but I think they're going to be pretty locked in because of what this November means. And everybody knows what this November means. Playoffs, national championship, SEC title, Heisman Trophy, it's all on the table, and it requires a mindset of being completely locked in. There was a message on the Ole Miss locker room around the facility this week that basically said they're hoping for the most locked in Thursday that you've ever gotten. And something to the effect of, don't claim that you're a killer when you're not, because a killer would take what is exactly his. And I love the mindset of that. It shows a locked in personality. It shows everything is kind of going that direction. And if you just block out all the noise, which is going to get louder and louder and louder, because that's how this works. If everybody remembers what the Auburn situation was like in 2022, it'll be exhausting. But get this win. You have the Florida Gators for the chance to go 10-1, with Mississippi State to go potentially 11-1 and have, at worst, a home playoff game. That's a pretty cool deal, and I'm interested to see exactly how that goes. But I do think Ole Miss is going to blast the Citadel, and I think they are going to get ready for the Florida Gators and blocking out all of that noise as this week comes, setting up potentially the best atmosphere in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, honestly, ever. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. Anyway, thank you for tuning in and making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy breaks down the best conference in all of college sports, from rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.